I joined the survey in 1955, and at that time, and for several years preceding that, there had been a large amount of input of research money on the uranium program by the Atomic Energy Commission. And I benefited by that when I came in and started synthesizing crystals for the crystallographers to do the crystal structures of things like carnotite. So I benefited from that very substantially. Then Ed Roedder came, and actually Ed Roedder and I joined the Geological Survey within a month of each other in 1955. And Edwin came in to replace Bob Garrels, who had been in charge of what they called the solid state group at that time. And Ed Roedder took over that role. Ed established a project then that he called Environment of Ore Deposition, and I was one of the people involved in that. That would have been in the middle 50s. And approximately that time, Ed and I began to talk about trying to understand the anatomy and physiology of a mineral deposit, and we looked around for ones to find. And we had looked at southern Illinois fluorspar district, which is later studied by Wayne Hall and Irving Friedman very well, and some of Dick Holland's students working there. But and we looked at the Coeur d'Alene district. We were attracted to this huge vertical range that was available. And then Tom Stephen from the survey in Denver talked to Ed Roedder and said, you ought to look at Creede. And so in 1955, Ed and I went out there and we decided that, 1957, we decided that was the place to go to make such a study.
So they really chose the OH vein at Creede, one of the several there. They chose it because it was finite in size, but it was large enough to be of significance. Much larger systems, much more important systems in the world that are just too big to be able to really do the kind of detailed work that you need to. Plus the fact that Creede had big crystals that were easy to work with. Yeah.
Well, Phil at that time was teaching at Missouri School of Mines, and he and Ed got together and decided, well, Phil ought to come and work with us. So Phil became WAE employee. One was
yeah, well, you guys were out. I came back to work in the lab. So,
that's right.
So it wouldn't be vacant, not necessarily to keep things going, but we were doing the single ion activity coefficient
right.
studies on. And so I came back 2 summers on the Environment of Ore Deposition project, and then when you decided to go to Creede, I entered on duty full time in Rolla.
That's right.
And we sent our furniture to Washington, and we went to Creede. So,
yeah. Soon be after our 1959 session with Ed Roedder and Phil, and Mark Bodina, myself, and Norman Page, we spent 6 weeks in Creede that first
6 or 8
summer.
weeks, yeah.
And it became obvious that Mark was not, the job was bigger than Mark could manage all by himself. And so it kind of migrated into Phil's and Ed's and my lap.
Ed would slice these beautiful sphalerite crystals to look for fluid inclusions. We saw the beautiful stratigraphy
That's right.
of iron banding mainly in the sphalerites. And that presented the opportunity to see if we could trace the results of a fluid going through the whole ore body. So one of the reasons that Paul and Ed chose Creede was because of the large crystals there, and Ed was particularly interested in using them for his fluid inclusion studies and so forth. This sample is one of the largest of the sphalerite crystals that we got. It was actually collected by Norm Page, who was working as a field assistant for us at that time. And it is the sample on which Ed measured multiple fluid inclusions from each band.
Commented that Creede seems to be a university without any formal portfolio. We've had so many students do master's and PhD theses there that the list is quite long. It fills more than one page on a computer sheet. The results have continued to go. We're not finished with Creede. The more we ask, or the more we discover, the more we ask.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, Phil and I are going to be finished before Creede is. Phil and I have spent most of our recent time trying to document and preserve materials and data that we have gathered and passing it on via the Smithsonian for the next generation to have a look at. Because we've learned that all too often in these scientific studies, the work goes on until the project changes to another mission, and then the idea of writing a report or documenting everything goes away. And the study wasn't to understand specifically where the ore deposits were at Creede. They were trying to devise principles that we could use elsewhere.
We also wanted to test techniques and so forth, so we did a lot of work. For example, when Bob Bodner was here with us, we looked at the stretching of fluid inclusions, because if we're going to spend all this time and effort on looking at fluid inclusions, we want to have some idea of the veracity of the numbers. But you know, that's one of the spin-offs of any long-term study, I think, is you develop ways of looking at things. And, that was certainly part of the idea of going to Creede. And
Well, yeah, I think
that aspect of the natural laboratory.
Yeah, I think that's where our contribution lies, really, in devising ways to look at things.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was interested in trying to see to what extent we could apply some of the experimental work that, Phil and I had been doing, but especially that Pete Toolman and I had been working on, building up from the chemistry of the iron-sulfur system into more complicated things, especially iron-zinc sulfur. And we found that that was a lot of fun. Every day in the lab there'd be something a little different that we would be puzzled by for a while and then enjoy resolving it. And the application to the intensely banded material at Creede was a fascinating opportunity. And so that drew us into it. I would not claim that we were the last one, that we've said the last word on that. At least we hope. The last word's an obituary, and we don't pronounce that yet.